it's always the same people pushing the same stuff. And they have their echo chamber of sources from skeptical people. We have a whole list of them in our organization of all these skeptical echo chamber things. And basically, it's like if you're a skeptic and you disagree and you come up with pretty much anything, they'll use it in Wikipedia as a source. And then because they used it in Wikipedia as a source, that site now has commands more respect because Wikipedia is doing it as a source. So you have this feedback loop where these sources get used more. And then when like the AI programs start scraping stuff, they look at that too. And so you end up with this subtle but unmistakable skeptical mindset working its way into AI because it's scraping Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is controlled by these skeptics.
Welcome, everybody. Today, we will look into the psychology of skepticism, particularly about parapsychology and spiritual phenomena. Welcome to the show, Craig Weiler, and good morning, California.
Oh, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, it's a little bit early here. It's about 7 a.m.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you could do this early in the morning. It's late afternoon here in Europe. But anyway, here we are. Craig, you are a parapsychology journalist, a science editor for an outlet called Paranormal Daily News, and an associated member of the Parapsychological Association. But you also have a day job as a building contractor. Yeah. So how does that work out?
Well, in construction, it happens during the day. So this gives me the mornings and this gives me the evenings to work on stuff if I choose. And because the job does not really take up my whole brain, I can do other things. Construction it's a very hands-on thing. You're busy getting information through your hands and through that sort of stuff, and you don't really end up engaging a lot of the same mental processes that you do for journalism.
That's true.
So
but you can't make a living on the other things that you're doing then.
No, very few people make a living as a writer. I don't
tell me about it. Okay. Yeah, so I get it. So Craig, what drew you into parapsychology? You wrote to me before this interview that something happened after you started blogging back in 2008 that got you hooked. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah, that was a fascinating process for me. I got on a site that hosted blogs, and I think it's called the Daily Costs. It was relatively popular at the time, and so I started blogging about psychic stuff because that's always been of an interest to me. And I got all kinds of blowback, like literally 100 comments from skeptics going on and on and on about how this stuff wasn't real and whatnot, and maybe I should look into something else because I was obviously a good writer. And they, I mentioned that I had some psychic ability, so they said, well, you should take Randy's $1 million challenge. And I'm watching all this, and I'm reading all these comments, and so I thought, I'll look into it. I'll start investigating this stuff. And so really quickly, I was able to establish for myself that the skeptics didn't know anything, which is weird because these people were claiming to be like the defenders of science, and they didn't know anything. They hadn't done any research at all.
Yeah.
I looked into Randy's $1 million challenge, and it was really clear after maybe 15 minutes of research that this, first of all, wasn't scientific because they weren't doing any science behind it. It's, all these little one-off challenges and stuff. And the whole process was really obviously biased.
That's when you say Randy, that's James Randi you're talking about, the magician, right? isn't it?
Oh, sorry. Yes, James Randi had an organization, the James Randi Educational Foundation. He hosted a challenge for psychics, which he was purportedly would pay out $1 million to anybody who succeeded at the challenge. So I looked into this, and basically it was just a PR stunt.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't anything serious, and none of the skeptics had seemed to have read any of the literature that conflicted with what Randy said. So they weren't reading any skepticism about the skepticism about the skeptics.
Yeah.
The skeptics were never taking that extra step. They were just basically spitting out talking points.
Hmm.
And it's like, this is weird, because as I said, these are people defending science.
So then you kind of got even more interested in this topic, and you started delving into parapsychology and starting studying and reading more and more about it, right?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I started looking into things, and then, I ended up with Dean Radin's book, The Conscious Universe. I thought, wow.
Yeah, he was on the show just recently.
Oh, cool. And I was hooked. At that point, it was like, this was a science I could relate to.
Yeah.
And
but when you started blogging back in 2008, then about psychic phenomena, then you didn't know that much, did you? Or I mean, you were kind of interested in the topic, so you were open to the possibility that these skeptics might have something to that they were right in a way. So that's why you looked into it. Is that correctly interpreted?
Yes. I was coming from the position that I knew psychic ability was real. I was pretty convinced of that. What I wasn't convinced of, because I knew nothing about it, was whether it had been established scientifically.
Okay.
I just didn't know. So I started looking into that and comparing the skepticism to the research. And I was like, this is weird. These people they're not even close. So there's the skepticism was really obviously stubborn, angry, and somewhat irrational. And this carried through, whether it was just a random blogger, but to all the way to the scientists. You could just see these people were stubborn and biased to a very large degree in terms of the research. They could not see this stuff for what it was. So that got me focused more on the skeptics, and that was partly because I knew that my skills were in the journalistic area and not in science. So this was an area where I could actually contribute to parapsychology, was by investigating the skeptics and the skepticism. And oh boy, did I uncover a lot. And that is still ongoing.
Okay, so this is what you've been doing ever since. I mean, writing about, you haven't done any research, of course, obviously, because you're a journalist. I mean, same as me, but journalistic research is also some kind of research, if you will. So you've been looking into the skepticism and the skeptics mostly, or have you also been, I take it you have been writing about parapsychological phenomena and psychic phenomena all along as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been doing both. You can't write about skeptics all the time, otherwise you end up angry just like them. Yeah. And they, they're a stone wall, and eventually it'll just get to you. And I enjoy reading about the science and learning more about what they're discovering and writing about that. And I try to bring it to a more general audience, something which I don't think is done enough. Because most of the science tends to stay within the scientific realm, and it doesn't quite move out to the general public. Somebody has to educate people as to what's going on. So I've kind of taken on that role as well, and that's my happy place.
Yeah, and that's commendable, I must say. I mean, I'm so happy that you're doing it, and more journalists should do it, I suppose. So, what would you say that parapsychology and parapsychological phenomena are? Is parapsychology and psychic phenomena akin to spirituality, or is there a difference there? How would you define it?
That's an interesting question.
Big question, yeah.
Yeah. To give you a little bit of background, I was in the New Age movement back when that was like a huge big thing. And the the difference between the two is actually quite stark because whereas the people in the New Age movement will assert things based upon personal experiences, a scientist will never do that. That's only a starting point for science. The scientist will go see what they can establish through measuring and through measuring in experiments and building on a very careful knowledge base of of things that they can establish that people can repeat. So it's much what the science does is much more narrow than what the New Age movement does. But also the progress in science always marches forward, whereas the New Age movement was basically one big butterfly that just hopped from one topic to the next, never quite settling on anything and never building any sort of knowledge. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just
interesting. Yeah, I also have I don't know if I should say background in the New Age movement, but I've been interested in it since I was young, and I think it's a bit strange that people have. I mean, quite a few people actually in the spiritual community, or I mean, for lack of a better word, I'd call it that, are a bit angry with what they call the New Age movement. They say, "I'm not a New Age person. I'm not this or that. I'm just into spirituality." But to me, I never understood what the problem is with New Age, because it's a very broad concept, and it can entail anything really. I'm interested in things like astrology and tarot readings and things like that, and to me, I mean, everything goes together. No human being has the whole story, the whole picture, can give the full answer to what a human being is and where we come from and what the connection with the divine is and everything. So I mean, it's, to me, anything is possible almost, but I do agree that of course there's a difference between personal experience and scientific research. But anyway, sorry for the ranting here, but I just to come to my next question, I can say that on this podcast we have often touched on the in my view, unfortunate and almost complete separation between science and spirituality, or religion as it was back then. It was spirituality, of course, but it was there was mostly talk about religion that took place after the scientific revolution some 300 400 years ago. And they are two different ways, of course, of seeing and explaining life and the universe. But I think it is particularly unfortunate that the scientific side came to discard everything about the spiritual side. So I think that's a problem. But to some extent, this is changing, I think, because, or I can see that because, partly at least because of the renewed research and science into consciousness and what consciousness is. That was almost taboo for 50 years, but it has started again now. And but nevertheless, there is still, as you are going to talk more about, and you have already touched on it, there is strong resistance in academia for sure, but also in the media, strong skepticism about this whole thing. So how would you say, Craig, how would you say that the psychology of skeptics work, given the background that I just gave, and also given how you see upon life and the universe and all these things?
Well, when I first started looking into it, it was clear that skeptics have a pattern of behavior. So this isn't a bunch of people with different personalities coming at a problem. These are people with one personality type, always going in the same, always approaching things in the same manner. So what was the personality type? Well, we had stubbornness. That was a key element of skepticism. It's they have a lack of ambiguity. They have a lot of trouble saying I don't know. So they've always got to have a reason for something, and it's always got to be a reason that fits within their framework. So they have, and the framework is actually fairly narrow. It's these are technically atheist materialists that are the skeptics. And so because they have this materialistic background, everything has to be shoved into that, and you're not allowed to have anything outside of that belief system. So who are we talking about? Well, these are authoritarians. That becomes fairly obvious after a while, that we're dealing with people that have authoritarian personality types. And before I go any further, let me say that this is a spectrum. So people
have you looked into have you interviewed people, these samples from the skeptics community, or how did you come to this conclusion? How did you do it?
Well, I argued with them.
Okay.
And on social media, I've been arguing with them since 2008. And I would, for a while, I was deep into it. When I was, I had maybe a few hundred conversations with various skeptics over time. I was also getting kind of hooked into it. It's like, no, I have to argue this. There was something in me that was kind of pushing. It's like, we have to settle this. I eventually cured myself of that.
Sounds excruciating to me.
It
to put yourself through that. I mean, I'm not sure I could have handled that, actually.
Well, for me personally, there was obviously something drawing me into these conversations, and I knew I had to move beyond it for personal reasons. So I took this engagement with the skeptics as a challenge to move past the need to constantly engage them. And it worked. And once I'd done that, then I was able to see these people more clearly instead of simply locking horns with them. So there was a bit of a personal journey in there. And once you start looking at this whole authoritarian personality type, then of course you see it in other areas of society, and you see the similarity between how skeptics handle things and how other authoritarians handle things. So the demonizing your opponent, for lack of a better word, creating opponents as opposed to working together. As I said, the lack of ambiguity, the hostile tone, the arrogance, all of these things are very authoritarian in nature. And if they get something difficult to deal with, they just go on the attack. In other words, they won't sit back and reflect. They just try and turn it around. You ask them a difficult question and they'll turn around and try to ask you a question rather than deal with the question that was difficult.
Mm-hmm. Attack is defense to them.
Yeah.
But did you look into? I mean, did you, for instance, have as a template here some kind of psychological? There are these, the big five, for instance, personality types. Is that something that you have looked into when you have pinpointed what types of people these are?
Well, mostly I just sort of matched what I was seeing to what I knew of personality types, and then eventually, if you just look up authoritarian personality types, you can just kind of compare it with what you see with the skeptics, and you'll see that they tick an awful lot of those boxes.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it was a pretty simple process for me.
Would you say that these people, these authoritarian-leaning people that this skeptic community consists of, are the same kinds of people that are running things in this society? Have you seen? Would you say that you find these types of personality in other echelons, higher echelons of society, or yeah? What do you say?
Yeah, actually, the authoritarians tend to want to have power, and power and control. This is something that's very important to them, and so you tend to see a lot of that. And they like organizations where they can get in there and control things. So, for example, you won't see many of them working with volunteers, but you will, but only if they can control the situation to their liking. And you'll see them in academia. They'll get positions of power in there and then lock down their point of view. So you have entire departments that only follow this very narrow path. You can kind of see that, for example, in how psychic ability is dealt with in various universities. It's that if it's completely locked out, you're dealing with some authoritarians in there in positions of power.
Mm. So how would you say that these skeptics influence the public debate, which they do, I assume? In what ways?
Yeah, they do. They've got a whole system down. It's actually pretty sophisticated and very effective. There is an organization, the Center for Inquiry, which you would probably know as the people who created the Skeptical Inquirer. So the
Okay,
Skeptical Inquirer,
there's a guy called Michael Shermer who is the leading figure of that, isn't it? Isn't he?
he's one of them.
Okay. Maybe he's the most public. I don't know many names there, but okay, sorry.
Yeah. So the Center for Inquiry runs the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry. They're the ones that have all of the fellows. These are when you're talking about people like Michael Shermer. He's one of their fellows. Richard Weissman, Chris French, a couple of scientists there. And then, of course, Bill Nye and
the science guy.
Yeah. A lot of public skeptical figures show up in their roll call there.
Wasn't it Chris French who recently showed that he had somehow changed his mind a little bit, or am I not remembering correctly here?
Yeah, Chris French is an interesting. One of the more interesting skeptics because he's actually engaged with psi researchers. One of the very few that's actually engaged in experiments and working with the researchers. So as a result of that, over time, his viewpoint has gotten more nuanced. There's more ambiguity in it. So, for example, he's not convinced that psychic ability is real, but he will just very openly say that parapsychology is a real science. Which it is. The Parapsychological Association is an affiliate of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. They were vetted back in 1969 as being a scientific organization. This was a done deal ages ago. It's not up for discussion. But you still hear skeptics say that.
It's bizarre that they even deny that it's a scientific field.
Yeah. So, and of course, they're not. This is just a talking point they're passing along. It doesn't bear any resemblance to reality. But when you talk to scientists who are skeptics who have also engaged with parapsychology, they all say the same thing: parapsychology is a real science. So, the people who are actually more knowledgeable back away from the more extreme skeptical positions, which you would expect.
Yeah. So how do they influence public debate? These organizations and this magazine, Skeptical Inquirer, or is it a website, or what is it? It's a magazine and a...
It's a magazine.
Okay, yeah.
They have a print and an online version.
Online version. Okay, so how do they? I mean, do they have the ears of politicians or the ears of leading figures in schools and universities and academia in general? How does their influence? What does it look like?
So there are a few things. First of all, they have complete control of Wikipedia.
Yeah, we're going to delve into that soon. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime you have any topic on Wikipedia that has something paranormal to it, or UFOs, or Bigfoot, or alternative medicine, they have control of all of those. So when somebody goes to look for let's say somebody to interview on Wikipedia, they'll see these shining biographies of skeptics and these horrible biographies of everybody else. And so they'll naturally feel like they need to have the skeptical opinion because look at these biographies. Of the skeptics, they're quite good. They look very professional on Wikipedia, not really knowing that this is all a game that these people have engineered. So you end up with people being influenced by Wikipedia there. Then you have the fact that a lot of science editors tend towards skepticism themselves. They like they just tend towards it.
What's the
People.
reason for that? Do you think? Do you think that it feels more serious because we have been led to believe that this kind of worldview, the skeptical worldview, is the more serious one, and being too how should I put it? Leaning towards, or I mean, putting emphasis on personal experience and things like that. That's not serious. We can't go down that path. And I don't know what's the reason why you think these editors kind of want to look like these hardline skeptics.
Well, first of all, this is what people grow up with, is the skeptical position. So it's taught, it's kind of taught in schools, and when they get out into the world, the science community generally regards things like psychic ability as being fringe. And then this also, again, we're talking about people attracted to power, so they're going to tend towards the authoritarian personality type in positions of power. So you're going to see science editors with very strong atheist, materialist viewpoints, and generally guiding the science stuff in that direction, because that's what they believe is, as you said, is a serious science. And plus, if they deviate from that, they get attacked by the skeptics as being as pushing pseudoscience.
Yeah, I know, and that's not a good feeling when you're getting attacked like that. You feel bad about that. So it takes a lot of courage to step out of that zone, that box, I guess.
Well, that's certainly something that I've noticed in parapsychologists, and like, I love parapsychologists. These people are fun. They're interesting people, all of them that I've run into, and it's because they are fearless in that aspect. All of them really do not give a flying F about what other people think about what they're doing.
Yeah, it takes that. That's fantastic.
So you see people that are really capable of doing some deep thinking and not allowing others to intimidate them. So that's really universal throughout parapsychologists that I've seen.
And in the media, those journalists who are not that materialistic and who are not so skeptical towards these parapsychological phenomena and spirituality, and they end up writing about human touch stuff, right? Don't they? More like what do you call? I mean, health, the health department, and things like that. So they don't write about science stuff.
I haven't seen a lot of it. From my perspective, of course, I'm writing for Paranormal Daily News, which would be considered a fringe from a lot of aspects. It's a very well distributed publication. It's in Google News and all this kind of stuff, and it has a really high Google ranking. But you see Paranormal Daily News, and you automatically think this is really niche. So you're dealing with a situation where this is the avenue I have to share the science. Is a publication that many people would regard as way niche. And for example, I would never be able to get the same publications on Huffington Post, even though they would be very popular there. Because it's when you start writing from the point of assuming that this stuff is real, everybody takes exception to that.
Yeah, well, you see sometimes these kinds of articles in New York Times or Washington Post or mainstream media, but it's like tongue-in-cheek way of doing it. It's like, yeah, this is interesting, but well, we all know that it's not true, right? But it's kind of interesting and fun to write about it, so we do it in this way, jokingly.
I've seen that.
Facetious, or what's the word? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. I know what you're talking about. Kind of like wink, wink.
Yeah, wink, wink.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, but hey, we all know that this is fringe.
Yeah, and they have, part of the difficulty for them is that you have this large jump from scientific papers to public. And that's a hard jump for most people to make because there's a lot of background information that you need to get from a scientific paper to a popular article about it. Just as an example, you can say, well, cancer was cured in mice in a controlled experiment with psychic touch. This was Bill Bankston's experiment. And unless you can go into the detail, you really don't understand how good this experiment is. But if you go into that detail, you lose a lot of people in the public who have trouble following the level of detail that it takes to have good science. So there's a trade-off there, and it takes a while to get the hang of, what the public can absorb and what they can't.
Yeah, it's a dilemma. I'm sure you have, as you say, gotten the hang of it because you've been writing about this for so long now. I'm just dabbling with this a little bit, writing for this little organization, Frontier Journalists Network. So I vacuum the internet for interesting new research and other interesting articles out there about parapsychological phenomena and spiritual things, and research science being done at the interface, between science and spirituality. And it's I know exactly what you're talking about. It's very difficult to know exactly how to, especially if it's a peer-reviewed paper. It's very meticulously written and done, and a bit dry in its language. And I mean, it takes a long time to understand it yourself in the first place, and then you should convey this to people who have never heard about it. It's tough, but I mean, that's what journalism is about. So just have to do it.
I think one of my favorite examples is something called the differential effect in psychic ability. And if you understand what the differential effect is in psychic testing, it has huge ramifications for the science. So the differential effect is that if you take a group of 100 random people and you find out who strongly believes in psychic ability and who strongly disbelieves in it, and then you draw a graph of that after they've done psychic experiments, what you'll find is that the people who strongly believe in it are high, and they're above chance, and the people who disbelieve are below chance. So you've got psychic ability being demonstrated with hits and psychic ability being demonstrated with misses.
Okay.
So that's not a standard graph. So it looks like this. It's an S-shaped graph. That's not standard. That's not a bell curve. So something different is definitely happening. And what this means is that everybody is displaying psychic ability according to their beliefs, which is another way of saying they're creating their own reality. So the experiment is fairly obscure, but it definitely starts showing that there's a lot of human psychic ability out there creating things. And then Dean Radin used that same process for his entanglement experiments. And then when he divided this out by believers and disbelievers, same thing, the S graph, which means that human intention is involved in this experiment.
That's cool. Let's go back to Wikipedia and what you have found there. You've looked into this very specific part of the resistance, if you might call it that. And this is a place on the internet that I would say that 100% of the viewers and listeners have come in contact with. And you mentioned it already. Wikipedia is, everybody has read articles on Wikipedia because that's the first thing that comes up when you search for something on Google or whichever search engine you're using, I guess. And there is this activist group, I think it's called the Guerilla Skepticism on Wikipedia, GSOW. Is that correct?
That is correct. The Guerilla Skeptics on Wikipedia.
Yeah. So tell me how you are, as far as I understand, you and this other independent researcher, Rob Heatherly, you're
yes.
conducting some kind of a probe into this group and its activity, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so tell us just, sorry for continuing here, but I'll soon let you answer fully here. But tell us how you found out about this group and who they are and what they do.
Back in 2013, I first encountered them after I had covered a TED Talk by Rupert Sheldrake, where he had talked about materialism and they banned his talk. Whole other issue on TED Talks. I was covering that, and then after that controversy finally died down, Rupert Sheldrake had noticed that his biography was getting steadily worse, and he asked for help. So I thought, I'll try going on Wikipedia and see what happens. And what I encountered were skeptics that were, quite frankly, worse than any I'd ever encountered. Really, really obnoxious people. And that was a surprise. And so I eventually learned through investigating that this was a Guerilla Skeptics group, that they were associated with the Skeptical Inquirer and the Committee for Skeptical Investigation and the Committee, or the Center for Inquiry. The Center for Inquiry is an atheist organization that promotes atheism throughout the world. They're the most successful of those groups. So this Wikipedia group is run by Susan Gerbic, and like many other people, other groups, they figured out that if they control administrative positions, if they can get the ear of administrators and make convincing arguments, that they can get other people booted off the platform. And they can start clearing house and making their life easier by simply making sure that there's nobody there to disagree with them. And when I got on with Rupert Sheldrake's biography, that's exactly what happened. There were like 4 people trying to improve the biography, and they kicked them all off. I didn't get kicked off, but only because I wasn't doing anything. I was writing about it. They didn't have anything to get me on. But everybody else. You
weren't editing the article on Wikipedia. You were just writing about it on your in your magazine, or?
Well, I had a blog at the time.
Okay.
Personal one on WordPress. That was really my avenue, and but it was it attracted attention within the world of parapsychology. It had grown quite a bit, so it was a useful tool. However, what was happening on Wikipedia, I surmised very quickly that if I tried to do any actual editing, that I would just get booted off. And so my energy was better spent just documenting what I was seeing.
But if you did try to do some editing, how long time would it take before one of these guerrilla skeptics was there and re-edited what you had edited? How long time did it take, and how did you notice it, and what did it look like?
Well, if you try and put an edit in, they just revert it. They get flagged through their software, and they just revert it immediately. And then if you try to keep reverting their revert, then they say, "Well, you're edit warring, off the platform." Yeah.
But I mean, they're not owning Wikipedia. How can they have this power?
They have captured the administrative positions.
Okay.
So they can control the process. It's easy.
Can anyone do that?
Any group.
Any group.
With enough time on Wikipedia and enough patience, your group can eventually capture portions of Wikipedia. You can make as many accounts as you want to support your group. These are called sock puppets, where you have more than one account. And as long as you control the administrative positions, nobody's going to call you out on it. And so you can control your little area of Wikipedia. I have no idea what other groups are out there, but I would imagine, based upon how easy it is for somebody to control that pretty much anybody with an interest in controlling the dialogue is out there on Wikipedia trying to do that.
Yeah. So what about the top? I mean, the leading people of Wikipedia is not. I'm not talking about Jimmy Wales personally, but him too. But I mean, the people running the show at the top. What are these? What do they do about this? I'm not saying that they should control be in control of the information, but somebody should be able to control the controllers, control the policemen, if you might call them that. There are policing articles on Wikipedia. Who are in charge of controlling the controllers?
Okay, so you're asking, is there like a high court in Wikipedia where
yes,
where this stuff gets resolved?
Yep.
The answer is sort of, but it has no teeth. Basically, the inmates are running the asylum, to put it in those terms. And Jimmy Wales himself is that kind of a skeptic.
Yes, I have suspected that, or I almost know that. I think maybe he's actually pulling the strings a little bit, actually.
Well, he encouraged groups like the Guerilla Skeptics in the beginning, when they got on there, to protect science from all this woo stuff.
Yeah.
And the result of that is that those people have the blessing of Wikipedia to run around and control these areas.
Yeah.
And again, once you have administrative control, you don't have to listen to anybody. You don't have to argue with anybody. You just kick them out. And
that doesn't sound good in my ears.
No, it's not. And it creates a situation on Wikipedia where you have groupthink, where everybody's the same in certain areas of Wikipedia, and so there's nobody questioning these problems, and so Wikipedia in no way reflects the progression of science, particularly in these areas, because it's always the same people pushing the same stuff, and they have their echo chamber of sources from skeptical people. We have a whole list of them in our organization of all these skeptical echo chamber things. And basically, it's like if you're a skeptic and you disagree and you come up with pretty much anything, they'll use it in Wikipedia as a source, and then because they used it in Wikipedia as a source, that site now has commands more respect because Wikipedia is doing it as a source. So you have this feedback loop.
Yeah.
Where these sources get used more, and then when like the AI programs start scraping stuff, they look at that too, and so you end up with this subtle but unmistakable skeptical mindset working its way into AI because it's scraping Wikipedia, and Wikipedia is controlled by these skeptics.
Yeah, that's a side effect that nobody has thought of. These new AI machines are crawling the internet. Everybody's thinking that, oh, that's perfect. Then they are just gathering the sum total of all the knowledge in humanity. But that knowledge has been manipulated, so it's not perfect.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Garbage in, garbage out. So how big is the problem? Because we have to describe this as a problem. No question about it. How big is it? How many articles, for instance, does this group GSOW have control over, and how many articles are actively being edited all the time? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, according to them, they actively control around 2,000 Wikipedia articles.
Okay, and they are about people who are dealing with these kinds of, parapsychological things, and
well, first of all, every psychic phenomena, like psychometry, mediumship, telekinesis, dowsing, all of this stuff is all handled by them.
And they all have their own, each topic, each phenomenon has its own article on Wikipedia.
Yeah. And then you have all the people that are associated with those, that they either get their biography left off entirely, they just get disappeared by them, or if they're too well known, then they have a biography, but it's a fairly negative one. So, for example, if you look at Dean Radin's biography versus one of these skeptics, like let's say Joe Nickell, like an editor for the Skeptical Inquirer, if you compare them, Joe Nickell's looks a lot better, even though by any normal standards, Dean Radin is absolutely head and shoulders above this guy. If Joe Nickell's world blew up, it wouldn't reach Dean Radin's for 2 weeks. I mean, that's how different these guys are on the scale of reputability.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe you. I mean, I've spoken to Dean and I've seen what he's done and how many books he's written and the research he's done and all that. So, yeah, I wanted you to come up with a few salient examples. You've already mentioned Rupert Sheldrake's biography article there on Wikipedia, and now you're talking about Dean Radin. In what ways do these articles is this group corrupting these articles? How does it? What does it look like? I mean, we can, of course, we can encourage people to look for themselves, but can you give a couple of salient examples of what it looks like?
Oh, sure. So you can encourage people to look at this stuff, but it's really difficult unless you already have knowledge of it. In other words, you have to know all about this stuff.
That's true. Yes, that's
before
true.
Before you can decide
what to look for to become suspicious. What to look for and to realize that this article might not be the whole story here.
Well, so here's where it gets tricky. For example, if they're talking about scientific experiments, there's always a rebuttal. In parapsychology, there's always a rebuttal. If the rebuttal is not included, if they talk about the experiment and then the skepticism and then it stops, a rebuttal is missing every time. So one of the things that they will do is simply omit the rebuttal.
Okay.
And because I have knowledge of this organization and all of their echo chamber stuff, I can go through an article and find out, okay, this CSI fellow, CSI fellow, CSI fellow, CSI fellow, down in the citations, you can see that they're citing all these CSI fellows, Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, CSI.
Yeah.
So
they're citing themselves.
They're citing themselves, yeah. And when you look at the articles they're citing, you'll see Skeptical Inquirer, the Skeptics Dictionary, the Quack Watch, and they'll all these things that are owned by skeptics. They're sites that are owned by skeptics that they're using as sourcing for Wikipedia. So I can go down there and just start picking them out because they're fairly obvious to me. And then when you start seeing those in the article, you know that it's biased, that they've come along in that article and they've put their own people in there. And so, for example, in Rupert Sheldrake's article, it's basically an advertisement for the skeptic.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have anything to do with his accomplishments. I mean, you can kind of get there if you know what he's already done, but you're better off going to his own website.
Yeah. It's. I mean, if you know what the truth is about these people, it's a bit tragicomical, but it's really very sad. I mean, because so many people don't know that much about Rupert Sheldrake or Dean Radin that you and I do, and I mean, they're just at a loss here. How could they know? How should they know that these are all?
No, they can't.
They can't.
You can't know these things without having this background knowledge. Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I do is I write about, what I'm finding in Wikipedia, in order to educate the public that, hey, this isn't right. This is not working the way it should. And you need to be really careful when you look at these topics on Wikipedia, because they get slowly turned into these skeptical advertisements. And what they're selling is materialist atheism. You're literally getting somebody's quasi-religion in Wikipedia. I don't really want that.
No. Yeah, people should know about these things. And of course, I mean, it's not an official encyclopedia, but it's become so big now that it's being used by everybody, I guess. I mean, even politicians, probably, they wouldn't admit it in a speech or anything like that, but I'm sure they find information on Wikipedia. Everybody does that.
Well, what I've found is that I can kind of tell, when I'm reading an article, whether they got the information from Wikipedia, because there are some things that turn up there that you really aren't going to find anyplace else.
Yeah.
For example, the use of pseudoscience and parapsychology pretty much died in 2018 when Etzel Cardenia publishes a paper in the American Psychologist outlining the evidence for psychic ability.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
know
you've
about
seen
that. I know about that study because he was on the show as well a year ago or so.
Yeah. So that basically ended any discussion about that. And if you go into the scientific community and you look for parapsychology, you don't see references to it as a pseudoscience from a scientific perspective. They've just taken that part out now. It doesn't really show up that way. There's question about whether psychic ability is real, but they're not really questioning whether actual science is being done on it.
Yeah. So Wikipedia there's inertia in the Wikipedia world.
Massive inertia.
Yes, massive inertia.
Yeah. Well, the problem for them is if they acknowledge that parapsychology is a real science, then they have to acknowledge that all of these experiments are real. And they can't post, and if they can't, so at that point, they cannot paste pseudoscience and fringe labels all over everything. And if they can't do that, then they have no justification for being super biased.
That's true.
So their whole house of cards is dependent on them labeling these as pseudoscience and fringe, which is something no other encyclopedia does. So, for example, if you compare parapsychology on Wikipedia to Encyclopedia Britannica, they're entirely different. These two explanations are completely different. One is horribly biased and opinionated, and the other one just kind of tells you what it is.
Yeah.
And you don't have to guess which one's which.
No, I think the audience can also have a good guess there. So what about Wikipedia's other, I know you're looking into this because you've studied and written about this topic for so many years, but what about Wikipedia's other quote unquote policed topics? I mean, I could think of, and I would say that I've actually seen examples of it also, medicine, COVID policy and vaccines, of course, earth science, then we have climate change, and then archaeology is another topic that is, for some strange reason, contentious when there is talk about lost civilizations and that civilization might be much older than we're told in school. Have you looked at all into any other of these topics that might be contentious and falsely depicted on Wikipedia?
Okay, first bear in mind that in order to properly evaluate a topic, I have to know about it really well. And so I am necessarily limited based upon what I've been able to, what I know in my own knowledge base. Before I go into Wikipedia, I can find skeptical sourcing in there, but in terms of what's the whole picture and how does this compare, I can't do that with everything. What I have discovered is that they absolutely trash alternative medicine of all sorts. And the silliest of them is probably chiropractic care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, going after chiropractic.
That's so mainstream nowadays.
It is. Yeah. It's a perfectly normal care.
Yeah, I go to a chiropractor every 4 months or so.
I go every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah. They're perfectly normal, and it's good health care, and it's very preventative, because this is, just looking at that, this is somebody that sees you on a regular basis, unlike any other healthcare provider, and they see you over a course of years, so they'll be able to monitor your health better than anybody else. Duh.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, so it's alternative healthcare, and then you have Bigfoot research. That one I did do some studying into, and yeah, Wikipedia completely butchers it. They cite a lot of their own people and their own sources in terms of Bigfoot and the researchers that are involved in it. And of course, because I'm working with people who are heavily into UAPs, I know from their evaluations of Wikipedia that area is also horribly biased.
Yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, but that's because I have people around me who can tell me what the truth is.
Yeah, maybe they're confused now that even the Pentagon is disclosing some of these sightings now.
Yeah, it's been obvious to me, for example, for myself, that in order to educate myself properly, it would take a long time. That there's an awful lot of material, and then you have the problem of disinformation, and then bad information, and then good information, and being able to sort through that in that particular topic is really difficult.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean the term disinformation is really problematic, I think, because it's in the eye of the beholder. Often, I mean, because I mean, for instance, in your case here, and also I would agree on that. What is written about Rupert Sheldrake on Wikipedia is disinformation, but they wouldn't say that themselves, of course.
Yeah. Well, the difference for them on Wikipedia is it's not intentional disinformation,
isn't it? Well,
no, they
believe what they're writing, of course. Yeah.
They believe their own story. So I would not put that into the classification of disinformation.
But I'm not sure, because I mean they might write things there that they know that he's done this kind of research, and they know that a lot of other people believe it, or I mean they're condoning it. They're supporting the research that Sheldrake has done. They know that there are even a lot of scientists who agree with Sheldrake, or who say that he's done rigorous research here, but they will still not write that. And then I think it's kind of a disinformation thing, because they're believing what they're writing, but they're omitting so much information about other people who have a different view, that it ends up as being disinformation, in my view.
Well, I would agree that it is disinformation, but do they believe it? Yes. We follow their conversations on different social media platforms, so we have some insight into their thinking. And what we discover is what we believe to be just massive cognitive dissonance. So, and then they apply their fringe and pseudoscience labels to stuff. And so, let's say, for example, we've got a staring experiment by Rupert Sheldrake. So, and then we have a skeptic that tried the experiment and failed. And then we have Rupert Sheldrake's rebuttal to the skeptic, pointing out all the errors in the skeptical experiment. This is really typical to find this kind of scenario in parapsychology. To find the original study, the criticism, and then the rebuttal to the criticism. So what the skeptics justify what they do by first labeling parapsychology as pseudoscience and fringe. Then when Rupert Sheldrake does an experiment and there is a criticism or a failed experiment, they feel justified because of the fringe label of leaving off the rebuttal. Because reasons. These people are not the sharpest tools in the shed. And they're definitely very, very poor scholars. So, there's that.
And they have so much influence. That's problematic.
Well, and a lot of the editors are getting trained by the skeptics are holding these training classes for editors, and they're teaching them to do this stuff, and they're omitting all of the conflicting information. So they'll just help these new editors that they're training walk through the process of doing it the skeptic way, but not the process of actually thinking about what they're doing.
What about this leading figure of that group, GSOW, Susanne Gerber? Is that the name?
Susan Gerbic.
Susan Gerbic. Is she one of the sharpest tools in the shed, would you say?
No.
Not even her?
No. I mean, to be fair, all right, she's created and run a volunteer organization with up to 150 people for over 10 years.
Yeah, that's an achievement.
That is absolutely an achievement, and she deserves whatever kudos a person gets for accomplishing something like that. When you look at her scholarship, that's definitely a weak point. So I would classify her as an excellent organizer, detail-oriented, and able to, herd cats, which is what you do in volunteer situations. So these are admirable skills. But when it comes down to actually paying attention to true scholarship, I don't think she even knows what that is.
Mm. Okay, Craig, this is so interesting. We're running out of time. I know you have to go soon here. So one question now, after having heard all this about Wikipedia and what's happening with the skeptics there, is what can be done? And you're trying to do something together with your colleague there, Rob. So what are you trying to do now with this probe, and what do you hope to achieve with this?
That's an excellent question. So Wikipedia has been dealing with these kinds of crises for its entire existence. They're coming up all the time, and their pattern has been to simply ignore them. So what we have concluded is that the only way we can deal with this is to constantly apply pressure. So it's not any one big thing that we do, but we simply keep publishing what we find over time and have this trickle of information detailing what's going on Wikipedia so that it slowly gets into the public awareness. This also has the effect of annoying the absolute crap out of editors that want Wikipedia to be more scholarly. Because we're informing them of what the skeptics are doing, and they become less and less tolerant within Wikipedia of how the skeptics are handling things. Mostly because we have proper information for these subjects and we can show it, and they take that seriously.
Okay, but so, you're not going to collect all your findings in one study or so, or one piece of one probe that you will publish somewhere.
Well, that's interesting. We have one person in the group. His name is Jeff Lawrence, and he went through. This thing is like 40 pages long of all the areas that have been influenced by skeptics that he's been able to find, and what the actual research was. And so he put together something for us. He's still doing final revisions on that, but it's a fantastic paper. It's a lot to slog through because there's quite a few pages and the print is kind of small. But he's done a fantastic job of providing an overall document. Of course, the problem with that is that if you come up with something that big, nobody reads it. Or they only read a little bit here or there.
Yeah,
it's hard to get
that's true. But then you can write articles summarizing it in different outlets, and it could be a good thing that it's there because it looks serious and it looks real, and everybody has respect for a thick paper like that. So
when it was originally a letter to Jimmy Wales.
Oh yeah.
He was somebody who donated to the Wikimedia Foundation for many years because his father was a fighter pilot in the RAF. Wikipedia had an article on him, and he'd gotten on there and improved it, and everything was just hunky-dory. But he also has interest in the paranormal and stuff, and as soon as he got into that, he realized that something was seriously wrong. And that was why he started putting the letter together, and this just happened to coincide with our group.
Did Jimmy answer?
We haven't not formally submitted it. He's still working on his final revisions for it, but we will try to get it to him one way or another.
Yeah, I've actually interviewed him for a Swedish newspaper many years ago, but I didn't ask about these things. I wasn't as aware as I am now about the bias, so I was mainly positive, I guess, in that interview. I mean, the idea is excellent. Wouldn't you say? A crowdsourced encyclopedia.
Well, it has enormous benefits to society. And one of them being is that you have this one source where you can find out about all kinds of different things. As long as they're not busy being deletionists, Wikipedia provides a source for all of this artificial intelligence scraping. And so by having this huge source of all these different topics, some of them quite obscure, you have a way for the world to find them. And for people to call up these things in search and find very obscure details about very obscure things. Wikipedia is great for that. It's just been turned into in some areas, it's been turned into a complete propaganda tool.
Mm. Yeah.
And it's kind of, for a lot of important topics, it's kind of useless.
It is. You have to be very skeptic. Skepticism is the word when approaching Wikipedia. I mean, you can use it, but you have to be very careful and check other sources as well. So, Craig, thank you so much. Where can people now find out more about your work on parapsychology and with the Guerilla Skeptics?
One of the best ways to find me is I write articles for Paranormal Daily News. So you will be able to find my articles on there. If you search me on there, you'll see a list of all the stuff that I've written. And you get to choose whether you want to dive into the Wikipedia side of things and the criticism of skeptics, or whether you just want to see what the science is in many different areas. In parapsychology, I give people a nice, easy way to dip a toe in without having to get into the heavy details of it.
Yeah.
If you want to contact me, I'm on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Or X.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Difficult to get used
to. And that is probably the best way. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
All under my own name.
Okay, we will put links in the show notes or description box or whatever you want to call it as well. So, Craig, thank you so much and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.